Hey, it's Brock here with Rock Hill Farms, and today I want to talk about 5 things that I wish I knew before getting a sawmill. So if you guys follow the channel, you know that I was in the market for a sawmill for at least a year, and really a lot more than that. But over the course of a year, I traveled around and talked to different sawmill owners, looked at different brands, and really tried to do my research. But there were still a few things that surprised me after having one. So I've got a lot to say about it, but I also have a lot of work to do in here. We spent the last 3 days at the Okie Homesteading Expo doing a sawmill demonstration, and that was so much fun. I really loved doing that demo and meeting people, but the result is when I came home, I've got work to do to get set back up properly. First of all, I had to re-level the mill a little bit while I was there, which means it's not level now. And then second, I milled all this lumber, and now it's just laying here, not cleaned, not stacked, not separated, where it's going to get ruined. So I need to get some work done while I talk. So that's the first thing I want to do, is level the mill. Okay, we're level right there. The first thing I wanted to talk about is that milling logs isn't that time consuming. Milling is maybe 20% of the work that goes into creating lumber, because first you have to, cut down a tree or source a log in some way. Then you have to get it onto your mill and in position, and then you mill it. But then you have to do maintenance on the mill, sharpening blades, filling the fuel, anything to do with maintenance. And you also have to stack the lumber and air dry it and make sure it's got good airflow, store it in a good place. And all of that takes a lot more time than milling the lumber. So the reason I've cut maybe 3 times since the last time I did a true good job of stacking the wood, that's because I haven't cut stickers, and I need to. So I'll try to get that done in today's video. So that's number 1. And today, that extra stuff is leveling the mill. What's really interesting to me is when I was at the show, halfway through I started milling with a really dull blade that was fighting, and I waited too long to change it. And the mill wasn't level. You could slide the mill down it and it would rock without being in a piece of wood. And then when it was in a piece of wood, it would rock harder. And it really looked shaky for about half of the time I was doing it. But no one ever commented on that or seemed to notice, because they're not used to watching a mill. But what impressed me was that without really leveling the mill, I still got some pretty straight lumber. I mean, it doesn't look bad at all. Right before I changed the blade, I started to see some wavy cuts, but not too bad. My second thing I wish I would have known is know what you want the lumber for. Whether that's fine woodworking with some live edge or dimensional lumber to build something, have your plan in mind. Especially, I get the mill and the first log, it's like I'm just gonna saw something up just to do it, and then I'll have some lumber and I'll use it for something. Well, that is true, but also I don't have unlimited storing areas And I kind of do. I mean, I could stick it anywhere out in the field, but then you're mowing around it and you're protecting it from the sun. And so you don't want to mill a bunch of wood that's not going to be usable, whether that's the species or the dimensions or how you cut it. And I did a little bit of that at this expo because what I wanted to do was teach anyone thing they wanted to know about milling lumber. So that meant I needed to go through the process quite a few times and not spend a whole lot of time trying to worry about what kind of lumber I was getting. I intentionally got small logs and I made most of it into 2-inch lumber. But there's different types of 2-inch lumber. Is it 2 inches when you cut it? Is it going to dry to 2 inches? Is it a 2x4 like you find in the store that will dry to 1.5 inches? And if you do it all different every time, it's going to be hard to use those all on the same project, and you're at least going to have to plane them. That's in the 7 habits of highly effective people, is start with the end in mind. And so the more you have a plan for what you're going to use it for, the better off you'll be. And that comes to mind right now because I now have to sort this. This is beyond 2 inches. Okay, no, that's a true inch. It looked a little thicker. That is 1 3/4. That is 1 3/4. That's 2 inch. That's 2 inch. That's 1.5 inches. Not very smart. Now sometimes you get to the end of a stack and it's like this, I'm cutting everything 2 inches. The piece that's left is 3 1/4. I'm not going to get 2 pieces the same out of that. So I cut it a 2 inch, and then you're going to have an oddball, and you can use that for something, but the less oddball stuff, the better. And that's true not just for how you end up using it, but you've got to think, you need to make nice, neat, tidy stacks of this while it dries, and it's hard to make tidy stacks of random lumber. So that's the second item. I'll get this all sorted out, and then we'll do number 3. This stack doesn't probably look too much different than when you saw it a minute ago, but it's all sorted now. These 2 stacks are 2-inch lumber. This stack is more than 2 inch thick. This stack is less than 2 inch thick. And I should just be stacking it directly on here, but I can't, because the last row that I put onto my lumber stack didn't have any stickers in it. So that actually needs to come off, and I need to cut more stickers. But I actually need to cut stickers with the sawmill, and this stack of lumber was in front of the sawmill, and those are the prices you pay for being unorganized. Leads to inefficiency. So I'm going to set this stack off in one stack, hopefully, keeping it stacked like it is. Then I'm going to cut some stickers and do this right. The next thing that I wish I knew before buying a sawmill is that it's not expensive to operate. And that may sound like a small factor, but I would say a chainsaw is a lot more expensive to operate. Skid loader is a lot more expensive to operate. I mean, that machine that I'm loading these with uses 2 gallons an hour, depending on what you're doing. It can be more or less, but you can do like a dozen small logs on a tank of gas on this. It feels like, I've never let it run all the way down. I usually refill it when it's halfway or something, but it seems like I could run for a long time on a tank of fuel. Then I'm just putting water in as a lubricant, which is basically free. And the blades are $25, but the blade that I just took off of this yesterday at the show, I had cut quite a few logs here on a sharpened blade, then took it and used it the whole first day of the show. Like, you get pretty good life out of them, really. And you can sharpen them yourself if you get a sharpener, or depending on where you live, you might be able to find someone to sharpen them. But even if you paid $25, you're definitely not eating too far into the cost of your lumber. And for me, I think the answer will be to sharpen them myself. So that was the next thing on the list. That would be item number 3. Now I'm going to start cutting this up before we move on to item 4. This is actually the first time I ever cut stickers. Up until now, I've been making stickers out of leftover plywood that we had in the shop, and I've got a panel saw and just ripping an inch off of that plywood. Plywood is not a great choice for a sticker, and I don't want to go buy sheets of plywood, so that was never a long-term solution. So I think the way I'm going to be doing this is, well, yeah, I'll probably make cuts every inch here, roll the whole stack, and then make cuts every 1 inch again. I hear my son-in-law's truck in the driveway, and that means my grandson's here to do some fishing. So when I finish this up, I get to have a little fun. And I'm really not even that big on fishing. I like having a pond. I love watching the fish that are going to be in the koi pond. But I don't have the patience for fishing unless I've got that guy with me. Well, I went down there and got them started, took a look at the pond, trying to see if any of that algae or lilies were disappearing from those carp. Haven't seen anything change there yet. But I also don't see any dead or floating fish, which is a good sign. Zayden is obsessed with bass right now. Bass, bass, bass. So he's got a little lure that he's throwing out. And what we catch the easiest is crappie, perch, bluegill, and neither one of them's fishing for that. His dad is going after one of those big catfish that we got last weekend and lost on the bank. So I think he's got some liver down there. We'll see how it goes. If they catch one today, at the end of the video, I'll show you some catfish or whatever they come up with. But for right now, let's get back to what we're doing, which is the fourth thing I wish I knew before getting a sawmill. And this is probably the biggest of any of them. The number one most important thing I've learned from having a sawmill for a short period of time is that anybody can learn to do this. It's not rocket science. Now, it's like most things that you can continue learning about this your whole life. You can do it professionally and still be learning. But to make nice lumber, you don't need a bunch of experience or advanced knowledge. It's just not that long of a learning curve. So I traveled around, I talked to a few people who had sawmills, I watched them work just a couple times, I watched some YouTube videos, and the day this arrived, I had no questions. I just started sawing. And I've had no problems. It's been a worry-free experience. And at some point, I'm gonna hit a nail or in a log and break a blade, but all these are things you can work through. I mean, like, I already know what I would do if I broke a blade in the log. So for me, it's been a great experience. And I got one more item on the list, but first, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these stickers. All right, that is all the milling I'm going to do today. So 3 things I always try to do: put a clamp on the mill head or on the track so that if it gets windy, the mill head doesn't take off back and forth. Number 2, take the pressure off of the blade. Leaving that pressure on can kind of deform your belts or even your blade. So it's better to take the pressure off and then let it all the way down, because leaving weight hanging on your cables, shortens the life of the cables basically. So the 5th thing I wish I knew is what accessories I needed and which ones I didn't. And because I couldn't decide, I didn't get much to begin with. I knew for a fact I wanted the wide cutting head, which is why I went with the 130 Max. And that's one of the things I said 100 times at the show, is I think this mill stands out as being a true 30-inch throat at a reasonable price. I also knew I needed the track extension, although I haven't cut a lot of long material yet. I know that I will be. So that's about the only upgrades I did. Things I really wish I'd went ahead and did is the trailer. And that's personal preference. Some people never intend to take their mill off the property, but for me, I wish I had went ahead and got the mill trailer. Next, the tow board. Absolutely worth it. I made my own. I had a video where I showed it. It's not as good, but it works. So, tow board I think is definitely worth it. Next thing I wish I had got, and part of this is because I mounted my mill so high, but if you're doing it a lot, it is a little bit cumbersome cranking the handle. So it would have been nice to get the automatic log lift. And I was just looking on there, and man, they have a lot more accessories. I guess I didn't spend enough time on their website to even realize some of the stuff they have. They've got their own cant hooks, which look like a good design. And then they've got a cant hook pry bar thing that basically it attaches to the mill, and it gives you a point to anchor your cant hook for pushing your logs in and out. They've got a a really nice looking toolbox, and one that all of that is optional. It just depends. And it's nice that you can start with a basic mill and add that stuff later. But one thing I would do for sure is if you don't have a building to put it in, like I do, I would get the mill head cover. So I thought about not putting this in the building, but I didn't order the cover, and I said, there's no way. I care too much about my mill to leave it out in the rain. So, a lot of options to think about. But like I said a minute ago, my number one tip or thing that if you're considering getting a mill, the number one thing I would tell you is you can handle it. It's not anything to be intimidated by. The biggest challenge is getting logs onto the mill, so it helps a lot if you have a piece of equipment to do that. If you don't, Woodland Mills can help you out with like a winch or some other accessories for moving the logs up onto the mill. But overall, I'm thrilled with what I've got, and I'm looking to add some accessories over time. I appreciate you taking time to watch this video. I'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.